By the way, Avi Shlaim and Ilan Pappé are very interesting, two of the greatest scholars in the world on Israel, Palestine, and the Middle East. And neither have been invited on the BBC. I put a lot of pressure on the BBC. I wrote for them a lot and made a public fuss about. No, but it's just very kind of wrong that the senior scholars of that nature should not be. And they both live in Britain. Avi Shlaim is the emeritus professor of international relations, is internationally respected historian, serves in the IDF, Jewish, and so on. And yet Ilan Pappé has a similar profile too. And there's some rule which means they can't be invited on, which it shows that it has to be deliberate, that decision. But to answer your question about settler it's provocative language. The analysis is hard to get away from, and but the key book on it, as far as I can tell, is of course written by Mamdani's dad, the Professor Mamdani at I think it's the University of Uganda. I really recommend it. I mean, his father is a very important scholar, and it's educated me enormously in this field. That language is not welcome, and I tend to leave it alone because it's too inflammatory. Most people don't understand what it means. You can't, bear in mind, you can't use the word apartheid in mainstream circles at the moment, even though every human rights organization of any standing in Britain, the world, and Israel says it's an apartheid state. You can't use the word genocide, even though the majority of the genocide scholars are clear that that's what's going on, as are the human rights organizations. And you can't even say that Israel is committing war crimes. Believe it or not, the British government has never said that. It said the furthest it's gone. It was in a statement about more than a year ago, that there was a risk of war crimes. They can't even say that. That is how distant the official discourse in this country, Britain, is from what is actually happening. I mean, it's just it's farcical, actually.
Peter, do you think that the colonial history and settler colonial history of some of the Western powers of today?
Oh yes, I didn't answer that question. Yeah, no question.
Something to do with that.
I think that the idea of, I think that there's something very deep in the American psyche, the US psyche, that because they are a settler colonial nation, to use that phrase, and something. I dealt with this in my book, The Fate of Abraham, that basically the first 300 years after the Pilgrim Fathers, the only book which is really seriously read almost is the Bible, and that they see themselves as a city on the hill and enfranchised to dispose as they wish of the native peoples. There's a wonderful account actually of the native Indians, isn't there? Bury my heart at Wounded Knee. If you haven't read this, and it's reading it is just brought back to you all the time what's happening in the West Bank. And so America, I think, if you look at the country, Italy initially was way behind this, Germany, France, and Britain, the European states. We have to make a distinction between colonialism and settler colonialism, of course. And the French were the most brutal, and the Belgians with settler colonialism, and the Americans, which basically legitimizes you to kill or round up and just deny rights to the local,
and replace and erase
That's the
whole point of colonialism, the replacement and the erasure. Peter, one of the arguments about why, for example, Britain is not basically saying, yes, Ilan Pappé is right, Avi Shlaim is right, this is settler colonialism, this is what we're seeing, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, is because the moment the British government acknowledges that, it will have to pay reparations, it will have to acknowledge all its own complicity in all kinds of other enterprises in the past, and it's a bottomless pit. And the cynical argument is they don't want to do that.
Well, I in reality, whatever the crimes committed by the British Empire, the idea you have to, you're going to pay back the money seized by the East India Company to India. The British state would go bankrupt. I mean, it's not.
Well, that's right.
But I do support that. What I would say is that we have to acknowledge what's happened in the past, there's a new school of historians who do that, who are now being under serious, sustained attack for being woke or unpatriotic. It's fantastic. It is patriotic to come to terms with our past. By the way, there's some splendid things we've done in our past. Even the invention of Parliament, the idea of democracy, not just British, but we've developed it in a modern way, and so on. I mean, I'm quite proud. There are fighting World War II, 1940, Dunkirk, all sorts of fantastic things in our past, which we're right to feel proud of. But there's no reason at all why we can't. And this strange idea, which has emerged on the right, the MAGA right and its imitators in Britain, that we shouldn't examine the crimes we've committed.
I lived in Australia for 18, I lived in Australia for 18 years, Peter. And Australia has been trying to walk this really fine line of trying to acknowledge the past, but at the same time not be liable to anything and not pay anything and not pay compensation or anything like that. It's been a very dodgy path, and I think Britain doesn't want to walk that.
The Australian situation is it not different? Because you had the First Nation people who they eliminated in. Now they are still living. Their inheritors are still there in Australia. And I think that is slightly different. You see what I think there is that relationship has to be properly dealt with.